Hello, everyone. We're waiting as the participants are entering the room. The number is now about 25 people. We wait until 35 and then we can start. Good. So hello, everyone. My name is Katerina Anastasiou. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is the second webinar of the series about refugees and migrants and the conditions under which they are forced to survive during the pandemic. We're very happy today to have two guests, whom I will introduce in a second. Today, the webinar will focus on the conditions for migrants and refugees in the Balkan region. Both of our guests, I will try to pronounce the names correctly. Nizara Ahmetasevic and Emina Buzinkic. Nizara is in Bosnia right now. Emina is joining us from Croatia. The webinar will be like the last webinar, moderated by three of us. My two colleagues, Tatiana Moutinho and Barbara Schreiner, are taking care of the silent moderation. If you have questions, please take the time and put your questions in the Q&A box. This simply helps us keep track of the questions and all your valuable contributions. Of course, you can address the chat for anything else. Now, I will give the word to Nizara, who will start with a 10-minute introduction about the current situation in Bosnia and in the region. Then we will switch to Emina. And after that, I will be in dialogue with our two speakers. And at some point, I will let you know Tatiana will start reading out the questions from you. Thank you very much. Nizara, please. Nizara, unmute your mic. Your mic is still muted.
I'm sorry, I'm new still to Zoom. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for everybody who is joining us. And thank you for giving a space for a story about Bosnia and people on the move in this part of the world. I can start with something that happened last night in one of the camps in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and unfortunately, it's something that happens very often here. It's a camp Bira in Bihać, where more than 2,000 people are living. All of them, since the pandemic of coronavirus was pronounced, all of them are in lockdown. And in none of the camps, at the moment we have 8 camps in Bosnia, people cannot go out or in. And they are completely cut off the rest of the world and of the country. Inside of the camps, they don't have enough food. The food that they receive is not enough nutritious. They don't respect the needs of different people. So people with diabetes, children, women, nothing. It's all the same for food, everything. And people are becoming very frustrated. What is happening inside of the camps since 2018 is when the camps were established. I have to say that all the camps in Bosnia and Herzegovina are run by IOM, International Organization for Migration, with the presence of UNHCR, UNICEF, and other international organizations. And all the camps are financed only from donors, and primarily it's European Union. So European Union, among other things, is paying security, private security agencies inside of the camps. These private security agencies, who are basically working for IOM at the moment because they run the camps, very often they use a force against people inside of the camps. Last night, 2 security guards beat up boys, minors, inside of the Bira because they concluded the boys were making too much noise. It's a boys, it's teenagers. Of course that they are making the noise. After they started beating up these boys, one of the boys, as I was told, lost his conscience. And the other boys, all minors, that's the part where minors are living, started protesting. Security started beating them. Then they called police. At the end, a police came in and the police continued using violence. It was a very violent night in Bira camp. Protesters destroyed part of the camp, which is completely understandable if you leave 2,000 people in these kind of conditions. These camps are very ugly in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Personally, I call them concentration camps. We survived something like that during the war, and we can easily recognize how concentration camps are looking like. It's not much better in other camps in Bosnia. All are run by IOM. In Sarajevo, we have 2 camps. Violence is daily occurrence in these camps. They don't have enough food. Outside of the camps, there is approximately around 3,000 people. Some of them are in an area of the northern Bosnia, close to the border with Croatia, EU. Some of them are in Sarajevo, Mostar, Tuzla, and all over the country. Nobody takes care of these people, except local volunteers. They are hungry. Every day we are receiving messages from them saying we are hungry. They don't have access to water. They don't have access to sanitation, anything. They are living and they are hiding in the streets because they are afraid of corona. They are afraid of other people. They are afraid of police. They are afraid of everything. People in Bosnia are trying their best to help them at the moment, but it is becoming harder and harder every day, I have to say, because there is so much people. And sometimes, like 2 days ago, I received a message from a group of people telling me they haven't and they didn't have anything to eat for 3 days. And it's just one of the cases. So in short, this is the situation in Bosnia. It's not good, and I'm afraid it will be even more difficult very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nizara, for this important introduction to our discussion also today. I will come back to you with questions in a while. Oops. I would like first to give Amina the opportunity also to make a short introduction, and then we enter the dialogue.
Thanks, Katarina, and thank you, Nijara, for this poignant introduction that really tells us how complicated, complex, and extremely violent politics around migration and refugees are currently in the Balkans. I want to continue in the same sense and say people are hungry, people are violated every day, people are stripped of their basic rights, people are dehumanized, and that is a continuous practice that's happening almost everywhere in the Balkans, in refugee camps, in improvised camps, in the streets of different towns, at the border areas, and then deep in the territories as well, which is a part of the problem that we need to talk about as well. The violence that is happening currently against refugees and migrants, or as Nijara said, people on the move, is exacerbated every day. And what we are seeing everywhere in the Balkans is undertake of even more rigid measures, such as militarization and everyday surveillance of people on the move. This is a sort of a paradoxical situation as well, because people on the move are being stuck. Here, I would like to say that except for the violence that happened last night in Bira that Nijara just described, our attention came to a military violence that happened a few days ago in Serbia in Camp Krnjača, where a boy asked for pajama and where people asked for soaps to clean themselves, to have at least access to some hygienic items. And people running the camp thought that was too much of an ask, and have invited military and gendarmerie to come inside the camps to exercise the power and to create the order. And these two examples are showing us really clearly that current governments in the Balkans, entwined with the EU policies, are definitely going to show the most rigid instruments the states can pull for or push for when it comes to treatment of refugees and migrants. It is almost as the states are showing refugees and migrants that they are enemies, and they will be enemies until they're completely dehumanized. And even when they are completely dehumanized, there are going to be more instruments deployed to make them move away, to vanish, and to vanish from the face of the countries in the Balkans. I do want to say that everywhere in the Balkans, we are seeing a high complicity in conduction of police violence and state violence. The examples we heard about are telling us that international organizations are as well complicit with the violence that is being deployed in different camps across the Balkan countries. We are seeing that some local organizations are as well becoming complicit, not necessarily by deploying violence, but by not being vocal about it, but by not offering protection and more of a critical action when it comes to that. And that is part of the issue. We are also seeing that citizens in the Balkan countries are calling police to tell them that migrants and refugees are walking the streets, and that they feel threatened by those walking bodies, darker bodies, right? So we are here definitely talking about racializing of certain bodies and of the occurrence of new and old forms of racism. Which is, as we agreed, going to be a topic as well in this conversation. So while we are having these different types of violence happening in different countries, or all the countries in the Balkans, excessively really in Serbia and Bosnia currently, we also have to speak about what is happening, how this whole new conundrum of violence, surveillance, and militarization operates inland as well, where refugee children are going to school, where asylum seekers are being accommodated in official refugee camps, where we are actually seeing this translation of these types of regimes of violence. For instance, in Croatia, refugee kids are not having access to online schooling currently because of pandemic. All kids are being offered online schooling via internet channels, but also via television. Of course, the refugee kids who don't speak Croatian cannot follow the schooling the same way. Not only that, but they're also living in such a poverty that many of them do not have iPads, cell phones, computers, televisions, and definitely cannot access what other kids can. Another example is that a refugee camp, official refugee camp in Zagreb, is being fenced off under the justification that asylum seekers in there are not being obedient and do not abide by the rules that were given by the authorities that are trying to combat the pandemic. We are seeing that the non-governmental organizations that had a critical sharpness in their work, had a critical eye, and were vocal about the mistreatment of refugees and migrants, are actually being kicked out of refugee camps and really have no access to people the same way that they had earlier. So there are different levels of violence, exclusion, denigration, if you will, that are happening in different forms, in different public spaces, and the spaces that are hidden from the eyes of public often.
Thank you, Nizara. Also, I would say I'll address both of you with a couple of questions for now, and we see how this goes. I mean, first of all, to you, Nizara, I think what is often, I mean, at least here in Austria, I'm connected in Vienna right now. There is some visibility of the dire situation in which migrants and refugees are right now in Bosnia. There have been some civic society mobilization in this direction, but all in all, when you buy the everyday newspaper, you will very seldomly find half an article about the situation right now. So there is a lack, let's say, of focus in the information here, but then this also somehow kind of makes it difficult for people to stay informed. Nevertheless, what we don't know at all is what is the situation right now with COVID-19 and the pandemic in Bosnia. How does it reflect in measures towards the population, and if it's the same towards refugees? I mean, from what you told us and what we know, there are a lot of people in Bosnia that do not live in official camps, that are completely left out of the system. So all the good advice that leaders of Europe are giving their citizens, washing your hands, being hygienic, staying at home, these are impossible. How do people cope with the situation there? And then the same question again for Croatia, because I guess there are differences between the measures, and there are also differences between the situations. Could you both address them? Nizara, go first.
Yes, well, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have quite strict measures that I'm not sure I understand really. Why do we have to have police on the streets with the guns and everything to defend us from a virus? But I guess the local politicians did not understand that it cannot be done in that way. We also have a curfew. A curfew starts every night at 8 o'clock, and it's until 5 o'clock in the morning. And during the day, we should, as everywhere else in more or less the whole world, move as less than we do now. We do have to have face masks and gloves on our hands all the time. Unfortunately, hardly any of people on the move, especially those who are who are forced to live on the streets, they don't really have any of that. So if they try to enter to shops or a pharmacy, they cannot, because they don't have face masks. People on the streets are trying to give them masks so that they can move around freely. But then last week, state government adopted a new measure, which is only for people, refugees and migrants, and which forbids them from moving around, from walking basically on the street, or like any, I mean, we don't have a public transport at the moment, so nobody can use it. So it creates additional pressure, and still they want to continue their journey, and many of them are walking through Bosnia, which is not easy. Bosnia is a mountainous country, and it's not easy, and it takes them from Sarajevo to close to Bihać around 9 days to arrive there, and after that they continue toward the EU if they don't get stopped by Croatian police, beaten up, and pushed back to Bosnia, which is happening even now in these kind of circumstances. But in Bosnia, they have to oblige to this like ridiculous measure, which basically forbids them from moving around. In Unasana canton, which is the north part of Bosnia, the closest to Croatian border, they cannot even, nobody can take them in a car, which is a measure introduced only by the government in that part of Bosnia, and which is absurd, which is against the law. All the measures introduced by the government toward the people on the move in Bosnia are against the law and against the constitution in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Unfortunately, our human rights, we don't have a kind of like, civil society is very weak. It's hard to explain all this, but civil society is very weak. And at the moment, I cannot recall for 2 years, I cannot remember that we have even one organization or institution, even though we have Ministry for Human Rights and we have Office of the Ombudsman, but nobody cares of human rights in Bosnia and Herzegovina, not of people on the move, but also not of local people. I think that human rights basically died in Bosnia during 90s, and now we will bury them deep, deep under the ground.
Thank you, Nizara. Before I give back to you, Amina, just a follow-up question. I mean, since the lockdown started all over the Balkans, starting with Greece, regarding to COVID now, and not the Turkish-Greece situation, which was exactly before, have people stopped moving?
No.
This is yes.
You cannot stop people.
I'm just, I mean, I'm kind of putting the question there because a lot of people ask, but it was more or less the same situation in Greece as well. I mean, they have been pushed back on sea, shot at, but people don't stop coming because the reason they come is they want a better life. No? Okay, so Amina, I would give to you now to answer to the previous questions. What are the measures, if there's special implemented measures for refugees and migrants in Croatia? And perhaps to both of you, let's, Amina could take it in her answer now, but Nizara can come to you back later, is in terms of media communication of the government. I mean, what we know is, for example, that Hungary closed the borders as a first response to COVID-19 by saying that refugees will bring it inside the country. We had the same situation more or less in Austria, where you don't have the suspension of the right of asylum like in Hungary, but nobody can enter the border without a health certificate. And right now, I mean, if we're honest, not even Europeans with papers are able to get a health certificate because you just don't simply get tested like that. Anyway, so using this trick, Austria more or less closed its border as well. And at least in Greece, from what I know, and I have followed, there are enough politicians and mostly local politicians that tend to bring the COVID pandemic into relation with refugees and migrants, which is quite peculiar if you think of the fact that most of Europe got infected by rich skiing tourists. But nonetheless, I think it would be very interesting for the audience to understand what is the media discourse right now in the Balkan countries, and in what ways it is similar to what is going on over here. Amina, please.
That is a good set of questions. I will try to address a few here. I want to say that as Bosnia, Croatia has very strict measures, the state of emergency really looks like the one we had in the war. And by saying that, I really want to underline that checkpoints, physical checkpoints that we're having at the edges of different towns in Croatia, police patrols everywhere, policing of people movement, really only if people are going for a walk, having guards at the entrances of the stores, pharmacies, etc. And then also appearance of the head of the police in the media every day really very much reminds of wartime. And if you will, and if we go that direction, it also invites war trauma for many people, invokes fear, invokes memories, and the whole aspect of enemizing refugees and migrants really becomes present in the whole society. So it's not only that refugees and migrants are not able to go as freely to the stores or to public spaces, it is also that they're being policed not only by the police. As I mentioned earlier, citizens are very much participating in that too. I think we are getting disciplined. That is what's happening to everyone in Croatia currently. We are getting scolded. if we show a different understanding of the pandemic. And for instance, if we want to show an act of solidarity and volunteer for any local initiative, for instance, and maybe bring elderly food, or go to refugee camps, go to places where refugees are accommodated, this is not being encouraged. So any type of collective gathering is not being encouraged, except if it's organized within the official organizations that are offering volunteering and local aid, which of course is not a choice of many individuals who want to show solidarity in different ways. I think disciplining would be for many people acceptable if we were all protected, if we were all having access to healthcare. But as you are all aware, refugees and migrants do not have access to healthcare. And we are definitely seeing this most excessively currently in Bosnia and Serbia. I would like to also reiterate here that this whole state of emergency very much affects people on the move in all the countries of the region. And it serves very much as a continuation and reinforcement of social inequalities. And to sort of relate back to the reaction of transnational solidarity, which Nijara and I will talk about today, I would like to read a piece of our reaction here, which says that the state of emergency is unfortunately already serving as a rationale for the further stigmatization and repression of the most unprotected among us. But this exceptional situation must not become an excuse for continued politics of exclusion, restriction, and expulsion, suffering, and distress. The fear for our own lives and the lives of those around us that we are faced with currently have for many been everyday realities for much longer. These uncertainties of the present lead us to radically question the system of geopolitical hierarchies, racial and class distinctions that divide and rank us, producing a population of undesired and rejected people across the world and in our countries alike. In these conditions, we are left with nothing more than to work towards the removal of imposed inequalities based on social and citizenship status. And as we are working on erasing those ranking and classifications, we are being called out, and the solidarity is being criminalized. So I think our reality is that the solidarity is being shown. It's scarce. It doesn't happen in large numbers, but solidarity does exist. There are numbers of initiatives where people are showing solidarity, but there is also, I think we can't say solidarity is on the rise. Solidarity is definitely being scolded and being punished, and the courts have been participating in that lately too. We can come back to some new verdicts if we will talk about this later, but. It seems that that the institutions and the systems are definitely trying to stop solidarity work as much as possible. On the other hand, of course, it is it's kind of a contrast. There is not much solidarity where we expect that it could exist. It is always our surprise that the societies that have gone through such a bloodshed, such a violent disintegration of Yugoslavia and this disintegration of our societies are not being more ready to be of more of a support and, ethical, critical sharpness, ethical, critical support to people that are currently being stuck at our territories. This whole situation is not happening, hasn't happened, did not happen yesterday. It has been happening for many years. And it is extremely important to keep calling out the EU for the co-creation of this. We definitely have here a consortium of Balkan-led policies in fragmented ways, in ways where they're trying to anonymize refugees and migrants in a way that we did that through ethnic cleansing and different strategies of the war that were used here, maybe in finer ways currently, in maybe more sophisticated ways. But the European Union is definitely participating in this politics of exclusion and pushing refugees and migrants away from its territories. And European Union is, financing some of this work here that is being shameful and extremely dehumanizing for people on the move.
Thank you, Amina. I think your latest contribution now makes it quite clear why we need altogether also to scrutinize the European migration politics that have been practically killing people at the borders and within the borders of Europe. I think we have to take up this discussion, and perhaps it can be a part of our discussion later on. Particularly Croatia had also the presidency the last 6 months, and it was quite bluffing to see the reactions towards the claims for violations, particularly regarding the pushbacks taking place towards Bosnia. Yet, one question that I personally cannot avoid in our discussion with you today, and without wanting to imply any kind of an antagonism between both cases, but from where I see it, there's a lot of effort right now to get, for example, the camps in the Greek islands evacuated, and rightfully so, because of course the conditions in there are inhumane, people are neglected, have no rights, and so on. Plus, it is obvious that it's a political decision to keep these people under these conditions, under the pandemic. So it's very necessary to mobilize against that and to mobilize for the evacuation. Yet there are people in the Balkan countries that are exactly under the same harsh conditions, and they tend to be forgotten by Western media and also Western campaigns, which I do not imply that is intentional, but it happens. So I would like to talk to you a little bit about that. Particularly, for example, the Doctors Without Borders are quite active, very vocal, defending the evacuation of all refugee camps. There was a petition in one of those petition platforms with about 3,500 doctors from Europe asking, so to say, the European leaders to evacuate migrant camps because of the hygiene conditions and the danger for a major outbreak there and humanitarian catastrophe. But why? Why do people in the Balkans, why are you being forgotten, and how can we help to change this? And of course, Nizara, you could go first, Amina afterwards.
Yeah, thank you for this question. When I say we, I think about this initiative of Trans-Balkan Solidarity. Last week started with a campaign that we are trying to draw attention also to the cases of unaccompanied minors in Bosnia and Herzegovina. According to the official figures that are probably not even close to what is the real situation, we have more than 500 unaccompanied minors here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I think the number is much, much bigger. Why nobody is talking about them, not even local media or regional media, is hard to understand. Part of it is because the leaders in this part of the world don't want them to talk. They are highly reliable on political elites in our countries or on donors. Many of the donors are from countries who are supporting the policy of closed borders in European Union or even in the world. Of course, that they will not really support the media to write about something like that, because it will be very critical even about their role in the Balkans. We could also remind them something about the 90s and what did happen here, and also how the rest of the world basically forgot this part of the world and the everything that was happening to us. and to people all over Bosnia. After all, we survived genocide in the middle of Europe, and nobody paid attention. So I don't know why this is happening, but I know that if we don't find a way to start talking about all this and the children who are trapped in the Balkans, who will not be able to continue, many of them, they're in very bad conditions. Many of them are victims of all kinds of violence, including sexual violence. If we don't start talking about that, if we don't start connecting among each other, if we don't start looking for solutions, we will face another catastrophe in the Balkans. And I know how does it feel. I survived one of these, the situations when the rest of the world forgot about this part of the world, and I know how painful it can be, not only for us, for everybody. And I think it's really, 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 really the last moment that we do something. We have to do it like today, not even tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Nizara. I mean, while listening to you right now, the first thing that came into my mind was my first trip to Bosnia. I was there with friends on a car trip from here, and we were astonished by the mines, the signs, the warning signs for the landmines near Tuzla, but also near the border. And just some months ago, there was a reportage of the Guardian or BBC, I don't remember, for the situation in Vukac, and they were scandalizing the fact that the informal camp was so close to a mine. I mean, of course, it's a scandalous fact, but isn't the actual scandal the fact that there are still mines actually in the broader reason? And this is again a part of the question I put before. Amina, I will give you now the mic again.
Yeah, in full agreement of what Nijara said, I would maybe just say that we can think of this situation in different ways, because I think because it reveals different levels of political complexities we should grasp in our conversation. So apart from what Nijara said, I would like to add this. I think people are finding this situation, people all over the world, right? Or maybe even sort of close to the Balkans. People find this situation so heavy that it's so hard to digest, while at the same time feeling extremely powerless. And that is the product of the way we are being informed by the media, we are being schooled, and the way that our governments have been treating us. Not to feel power to change things around us, not to feel power to put pressure on the governments, not to even, I mean, most people cannot even imagine how to put power on the European Union as supranational structure and its governance. Lots of these things are too abstract for people. Many people have not been socialized in ways that reaction is invited, that political action is the ethical way of responding to critical situations around us. Most people were socialized that this is too rude, too loud, and sort of not wise, can be also endangering our safety and our comfortable lives too. That also needs to be mentioned. I think there is also a long-term, long-standing political message that people in the Balkans are really not very important. We are, I mean, you know, when you're reading books that were written in the Anglo-Saxon world around the conflict in the Balkans, you're often going to see or run into terms like Balkanization or, you know, savage war. So there is no really understanding the depth about the conflict that occurred here in these spaces. So without understanding this depth, people in the Balkans remain savages. And then, of course, the world is really not invited to show any type of solidarity for these spaces, let alone because these spaces are now being contaminated with refugees and migrants from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, all those really complicated places, you know, places that were supporting dictatorships for a long time, and so on. Like lots of labeling is happening there. And not to forget, all these places where people are coming from have been under such heavy conflicts that were part of the world, you know, larger imperial politics and military occupation that has already produced these subjects as bad, unwanted, and not desirable. So there is not really much of a portrait here that is going to be appealing for many people to come to react. Very often the reaction that comes is political but not ethical. Very often in these spaces we have volunteers from Western world coming to fix the problem from a very superior type of a view, from an imperial standpoint. You know, those of you who worked in Greece know that the coinage of word solidarity emerged there when people from the West were coming to spend their holidays and then also, you know, slash supporting refugees during part of their holiday, and sort of show solidarity only when it's really convenient for them. So that's part of the complexity here in these spaces, and this is something that local activists are trying to work through and show maybe, you know, different face of solidarity where our previous war and refugee experience needs to be more pronounced, needs to find a different angle of communication and support, and not support refugees and migrants as, you know, in ways that we as powerful ones are giving you disempowered some power. There is a lot of power imbalance here in this work. I also would just like to say that in accordance or in reference to your question earlier, Katerina, that media is definitely not being helpful here. We have seen different portrayals of migrants and refugees and those who are providing some kind of solidarity ever since the so-called refugee crisis started. We had the image of refugees being, you know, poor ones that need our help. Then very soon afterwards, we had good and bad refugees. Good as in Syrians who were maybe more educated than Afghans who were less educated and quite actually illiterate. So we had good and bad refugees portrayal. Then we had those terrorist attacks in Europe, and then all refugees became terrorists. And we had sexual attacks in Germany and some other EU countries. And then, you know, all the refugees and migrants became sexual abusers and rapists, and so on and so on. So this labeling has been a continuous process that has been going on. So, you know, the world is not really invited to come to work here with the rapists, terrorists, and so on. I mean, you can imagine what kind of an image people in the West have of the Balkans. It doesn't seem like a place where it's easy to come to fix things. And then those who are trying to fix things in non-radical and traditional political ways are doing more harm. And then those who are trying to do some radical change are often being labeled as criminals.
Thank you, Amina. I agree with you very much. Sorry, I need 20 seconds to grab myself because I'm relatively angry right now. I mean, what we just heard, it's a continuous frame all over Europe. I want to remind also the audience, just before the COVID pandemic, where there was the accelerating escalation at the Greek-Turkish border. We had the president of the European Commission flying over a helicopter, flying over an unofficial camp and the borderline with a helicopter, checking out how secure the Greek borders are. And just the day before, people were literally unarmed, people were literally shot at that very same spot. This is I think, a picture that will stay with us, and it's quite descriptive of the European policies of the last, for sure, decades. But the fact is that since 2015, the border is continually militarized all over Europe, and is becoming more deadly and more deadly and more deadly. And people's lives end up meaning nothing. At least this is the message that politics give to our societies. So I'm 10 times more happy for having this discussion again with you today. Perhaps to pick it up from there, I mean, the last week, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the last 10 days, there were approximately 80,000 workers from Romania transferred to Germany, Austria, and the UK together. These people were transferred to, let's say, to fill gaps in workforce, particularly when it comes to care work of elderly, and also agricultural work. So it's kind of incredible to see again how people are put, so to say, are given a value. Eastern Europeans are welcome where they have to work for us. The airports can operate, and we can make major evacuations of 90,000, 80,000 people, take people out if we need them to be more or less our slaves. At least in Austria, there was already the death of a field worker last week, and we had also some very crazy cases, people coming from Romania to work and being locked in a cellar for 2 weeks, quarantined by their boss, or the officials of Lower Austria importing care workers from Romania and keeping them two weeks again in quarantine with no pay. At the same time, again, we see how Germany is celebrating itself for getting 50 people out of the Greek camps, where we know, in fact, that there are more than 2,000 people, children, unaccompanied minors in the camps, plus the ones that are outside and stay off the radar, plus all children that are right now in the Balkans and so on. So, I mean, the hypocrisy of politics right now is quite obvious, but it's still very difficult to navigate a discourse of solidarity within this media landscape. How do we break this? What can we do? How can we narrate a story that empowers people as well, that also exists? I mean, there is, as you said, there is maybe not enough solidarity, but there is solidarity. There is self-organization by the refugees themselves, and so on and so on. Nizara, would you like to share your thoughts a little bit on that?
This is a very difficult question to answer, I have to say, and something I'm trying to figure out for many years, since 2015, when it comes to the issue of people on the move in Europe, but also before. And to be very honest, I'm not sure. Like, I think I personally tried to join, to look, to investigate, to research, to meet as many people, and to try to see how to do it. But it's in a current political situation, in economical also, but and plus now with pandemic, it's very difficult. Plus, you know, like sometimes I have a feeling that and that solidarity, the word has a different meaning for me, for somebody from Germany, for somebody from UK, for somebody from US, basically for people from rich countries and poor countries. So I don't know how to kind of like come come together, and how first of all we have to have same understanding of solidarity and of the entire situation. And Amina mentioned that we together with all the issues that we have to deal with, we also have to deal with this very kind of like privileged volunteers who are coming to our parts among the savage people who do a dirty job for Europe, because let's admit, we do a dirty job for Europe, where Brussels don't want to dirty, even Austria don't want to dirty their job. They give a Croats a task to beat up people and send them back and push them back and violate the law. When the whole Europe don't want to do their job, then they create Lesbos, then create Moria, they create Samos, and then the Greeks are the bad ones. Now Albanians are the bad ones, Bosnians are always bad ones, Serbs are bad ones, while the Europe are also like, is always like the nice, we should look how we should deal with this, we should learn from Europe. But I mean, I think we have to start finding to talk more, to discuss, and to understand the what's happening around us in the same way, because at the moment I don't think, like, for what I see from the international volunteers coming to Bosnia, that they often, for them, the two words have a similar or the same meaning, and that is charity and solidarity. It's not. It's a huge difference between charity and solidarity, and we have to talk about that and to teach each others and to learn from each others. So I'm sure that I didn't answer the question, but it's really very difficult and very important question.
Thank you, Nizara. Thank you very much. Amina, would you like also to take the floor on this question a little bit? And afterwards, I would suggest, we have already 12 questions from the audience, so I would suggest to start taking questions from the audience. Please.
So, you know, when I think of solidarity, I have different thoughts, but the first one that I have is this question: how does Nijara's day look like? And, you know, I often think of that. Nijara and I are in daily communication, especially lately. And, you know, this morning when we were trying to figure out how are we going to react to this situation that happened in Bira last night, Nijara said, wait, I'll be back in a couple of hours. Now I have to go, I have to do the distribution. She got back in 3 or 4 hours, not only with the distribution done, but with a new article written for, you know, another news portal. And, you know, there is not many Nijaras in the Balkans, but Nijara's work is the example of solidarity for me. Trans-Balkan Solidarity is a new initiative that we formed a few weeks ago when the pandemic started. And we reacted with a letter that was almost now signed by 1,000 people. But it was initiated by 20-ish, 30-ish activists from the Balkans who are in their daily lives showing what does radical solidarity mean, who are really exposing themselves, often exploiting themselves, their own time, their own comfort, and often, you know, not paying attention to their own health and to their own families, and a lot of those private things that people in the West usually very much care for. It is very much in our culture and tradition, in our individual selves, to be part of collectives and to respond to collective needs in such ways that we are okay with not thinking about our individual needs. That's a huge difference between the conceptions of solidarity. I do want to say that the undercurrents of this kind of solidarity is love for people. And I'm not saying this in any pathetic way. I'm speaking here about love as a radical and political notion. And to learn how to love people in that way is a practice that it takes every day to learn that practice and to practice that practice. So this is sort of an invitation for all of us here to start creating awareness around how love as radical idea can be practiced in our everyday lives. I also want to say this: we often walk thin line between humanitarianism and solidarity. We are doing distribution. We are helping in humanitarian ways to people that have humanitarian needs or basic needs, right? We do distribution of food or medicines or you know, doing other stuff that are humanitarian. But we always need to carry with us the very true idea that the humanitarianism is only deepening the state of inequalities refugees and migrants are in. This is responding to immediate needs. We should not ever create of a humanitarian situation a continued situation. And this is exactly what the governments and the leaders of this harmful EU policy or EU management of migration policy have really created. We are seeing a very long and protracted situation where humanitarian work is becoming sometimes the only channel of solidarity work. And this is what activists in the field are very much aware of. And this is what they're trying to say, what they're trying to act against and say, we need to create new forms of solidarity. And, you know, support these people that are in this situation to become also more political in what's happening to them in the ways they are being mistreated.
Thank you very much, Amina, also for your contribution and this comment. I mean, this is also a fact. We often also forget the self-organization prospects of these people, and they do self-organize. And this is a problem that you, or a problematic thought that you meet in a lot of people that try to do their best, but somehow avoid the political debate with themselves sometimes. Now, I would like to ask Tatiana to start reading out the questions from the public in groups of 3. So both of you have time to make your notes and try to respond the best way possible. Is it okay if we start already now with the audience questions? Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you good. Well.
So
Yes.
I would start with the first group of 3 questions. It will be 2 questions for both Emina and Nizara, and then 1 particular question for each one. So both Imad and Monica, they ask in which concrete ways or which possible actions could people from the European Union practice solidarity in the Balkans without practicing charity and without being patronizing regarding the activists? Another question from Vladan from the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in Belgrade. So asks whether there are in Bosnia and in Croatia attempts from organizations to address illegal, against the constitution and discriminatory acts from the states when it comes to deprivation of freedom of movement of people and their health conditions in detention camps. So there is this A11 initiative, and and other organizations from Serbia that have started recently this type of processes, and wonders where something like this is also happening both in Bosnia and Croatia. Then a question for Emina from Elena. She feels that the situation in Serbia regarding migrants is far from being transparent, and also that large face groups exist that call upon the fight against migrants. Which consequences do you think this could have in the long term from the side of the government, from hiding the current situation regarding migrants, the number of migrants in Serbia, and some supposed plans to include them in society? Then a question to Nizara from Desislava, whether she can comment on the new camp in Lipa supported by the IOM near Bihać. This would be the first.
Bihać.
Sorry.
No worries. Nizara, would you go first and then Mina later, like we've done it until now?
Yes. So the first question is in what way people from other countries can show solidarity at the moment with us. Not only at the moment, but I believe it's very important, and that's what I always beg international volunteers when I meet them, especially here in Bosnia, but also in Serbia, in Greece, and other countries where I was, is talk about this. Like go and put the pressure on your governments, because your governments are paying for this hell. You have to do that part. I can't. I'm also a person whose freedom of movement is very restricted. I'm a person who is living in a country where human rights are just the idea that we read about in the books and watch in the movies or whatever. We talk in these kind of discussions, but we really don't know what that really is and how does that really feel like to have your basic human rights respected as a citizens of Bosnia. So we need you to do this. We really need you to be more political and to think about what you do, and when you go to vote, when you go out in the streets, when you, whatever you do, you have to think that there is something behind and more than very comfortable life in European Union. And we are neighbors. I'm very close to you. So you have to think also about the citizens in the Balkans, but also about the people who are coming here and trying to pass. And after all, remember that for you, there are no borders. Why do we have to live with the borders? And these are your borders. These are not our borders. So these are all the questions that we have to talk and talk with us. Talk with people on the move. Ask them what they want. Don't come with the ideas. This is what you need. No, it's not. We know what we want. And people on the move, they very well know what to do. Many of them are educated. Many of them, they know where they're going and where they're going. So I think that they should be our first, even for us, even for anybody. They should be the first place and the first people to ask the question what really is needed. The second question is from Mladen about the organizations who are trying to answer all these violations of human rights. No, in Bosnia, nobody is doing that, at least not that public know about that. We don't even have organization who can deal with that. So we have groups of people, independent, who are trying to do something, activists, and we do connect with other people in the region, and that's the way how we try to function at the moment. But it's very, very, very difficult, and it's not. I don't see anybody who will do this. And I also have to say that the civil society in Bosnia and Herzegovina is by large financed through donations from IOM, which is one of the biggest donors in Bosnia at the moment, and the EU. So I really don't believe that organizations who are backed by the EU will be very critical about the EU. The last question is about the new camp to Bira. It's another concentration camp in Bosnia, probably. It's built 22 kilometers from Bihać. There is nothing around that camp. Camp at the moment is only a plastic tent where they will put from around 200 people under it. It's close to some kind of like construction sites, and I mean, there is nothing around. There are no shops, no houses, there are no roads. It's financed by EU. IOM will run the camp together with DRC, Danish Refugee Council. It will probably be a little bit better than living and sleeping in the streets. They will have access probably, even though I'm kind of like, I'm not like very sure, because even in existing camps, the access to water and the basic things is very, very problematic. So they say that they will have, and they don't have that access now if they live in the streets, but they will be deprived of freedom and deprived of their basic human rights. And it will be far away from anybody. Nobody will be able to see them. They will be completely dehumanized. They will be easily criminalized. and easily forgotten. So I don't believe this is a solution, but at this moment, this is the only thing that EU and the government that is very obedient are willing to do. So I hope I answered all three questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nizara. Emina?
I will reiterate the first response and say the pressure on your governments is crucial, because if there is no such kind of pressure, then our voice and our pressure to those governments is almost irrelevant. Pressures that need to be put on the governments of the EU countries need to go beyond petitions and beyond decent political tools. They need to be more radical and more visible. We are calling for more protests. We are calling for documenting more counter narratives. We are calling for envisioning ways of reacting to EU governments together with migrant and refugee collectives. I think that is a crucial difference, or a crucial step that needs to be made. The other thing is that we are not saying that international volunteers shouldn't come to the Balkans. I think both Nijara and I know really well that international volunteers were sometimes extremely important component in our peace building process in mid-90s here in the Balkans as well. So we are aware that solidarity is extremely important and transnational flow of solidarity must exist. But what we are here trying to say is that volunteers and citizens of the EU countries or US or wherever they come from should come and act upon invitation of migrants and refugees in the Balkans, and also local activists that are more aware of local situations and their own needs. The second answer is that yes, there are some reactions to state actions around surveillance and disciplining of population here. Croatian human rights organizations look pretty different than the ones in Bosnia. There is much more cohesion, and lots of organizations have been actually warning about surveillance technologies and politics for a long time, especially around the issue of migrants and refugees. So, for instance, lately, human rights organizations such as Human Rights House and Center for Peace Studies and the coalition of dozens of other organizations had a press release and organized an action against a state decision to surveil cell phones and movements of people in Croatia. More can be read on the Human Rights House page for Vladan, I think, who asked that question. And then as for Jelena's question, I worry a lot about your question, Jelena. You explained really well what's happening. You probably know it much better than I. But to me, the current situation in a year or two really looks dystopic. I think this may lead to exacerbated social violence of such kind that we will all be puzzled when it explodes, to a higher degree. I think we are already seeing humanitarian catastrophe. I think we are seeing that refugees and migrants are being stranded from public eyes. I think they are being exploited. We know that they are being also sexually abused. We know that all sorts of violence are happening. And I think just with this, on one hand, governmental push, on the other hand, civic push against migrants, with all this hatred growing, this could just lead to even worse of a social violence that we have seen so far. We often talk about harmful and rigid and dangerous situation in the Balkans, but these countries in the Balkans have different nuances. You know, Serbia and Bosnia and Croatia and Macedonia could draw similarities, but also there are sometimes differences in daily treatment of refugees and migrants and in the ways societies react. And, you know, by the mere fact that Croatia is part of the European Union, we are not seeing necessarily that, you know, rigidity in terms of what we are seeing currently in Bosnia and Serbia. So it is also our responsibility here in Croatia to very much talk about that and to warn that in our neighboring countries, there is a violence happening that is very much reminding us of the war times.
Thank you very much, Amina. Tatiana, would you like to pick up another bunch of questions?
Okay. So one of these questions would be by Monica, and who asks how can people in both countries apply for asylum? Another question comes from Valerio. So he mentions travel to northern Greece some years ago, where he witnessed a strong harassment by local people towards Muslim people. He asks, in regard to this, he asks, what is the current behavior of people in Bosnia and in Croatia towards migrants? Third question would be, I think it was more or less addressed throughout this webinar, but whether you could summarize it. So, and it would have to do with the coverage by the media of the situation of the refugees right now.
Thank you very much. I mean, this is a repeated question. The media coverage is quite important. Perhaps Nizara, you want to take the floor again? I mean, maybe I share also my thoughts to help a little bit the discussion. I remember 2015, for a brief time of a couple of months, the media were full of pictures of solidarity, people welcoming people in train stations and so on. Which was, I mean, there were enough reasons back then for criticism as well, but at least solidarity was visible and people on the move for some short period were visible. Since then, and since the closure of the Balkan route, where the estimated Austrian government and the chancellor nowadays played a role in, since then, the space that is given to media to report on solidarity actions or the actual living conditions of people without contextualizing them in this far-right framing that seems to dominate migration politics since 5 years are very scarce. So it is really interesting to understand how the media discourse actually and in what ways it is similar or different in the Balkan countries. And it is important also in order to start thinking of more inclusive solidarity campaigns that, in terms of including also the Balkans as an integral part of Europe, which of course the Balkan is. So, Nizara?
Yes, thank you. So when it comes to the issue of access to asylum, it's a huge problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina. From more than 50,000 people that entered Bosnia since beginning of 2018, only 6% were successful in applying for asylum. Yes, of course, many people do not even have intention to apply for asylum in Bosnia or to stay here. But I do believe, and I know that for fact, because I'm in contact with many people, that much more than 5% would like to try. And they like being in Bosnia for some reason. And some of them are very tired. They don't want to continue. They have different reasons why some of them fall in love here and they want to stay with people that they are in love with and to live here, whatever life they are living. So I do believe that more people would like to try with asylum here. Unfortunately, the government do not respond in a very good way very often, and there are so many obstacles for people to apply for asylum. But at the same time, I have to go back to the issue of European Union, because it's the biggest donor, and basically European Union is managing migrations here in Bosnia and not the state. Even the EU donations that are coming to Bosnia and going to IOM and other organizations, and then to local projects and institutions, but most of this money is given for security related issues instead of human rights or asylum in this situation, which is also a human right. So it is a huge problem in Bosnia, and I don't see that anything is done to improve the situation. How do people see migrants in Bosnia? Like in every country, differently. I have to say that I am very surprised that after more than 2 years since so many people came to Bosnia, a huge number of local population is still very positive, and they do help them, and there is nobody else, especially now in this situation, to help them. So they do survive because of the local people. There are many people who accepted asylum seekers or refugees and migrants to live with them in their houses. Bosnia is also half empty country because we have many migrants, many people died during the war, many people left the country and never came back. So it's really, we need people. Basically, we should beg these people to stay here. Unfortunately, the government do not realize that. But also we have to respect their wish. So it's still very good. I have I know that maybe this is not the real opportunity for that, but I have to tell you this story, and that will answer many of the questions. Every 11th of the month, in each month, since 1995, when Srebrenica genocide was committed, mothers and women from Srebrenica who are still looking for the loved ones they lost during the genocide in Tuzla go out on the streets, and they walk with the pillowcases which they embroider with the names of their loved ones that they are missing. And they walk and they protest in that way, asking for the government to help them to find the missing ones, the family members. 2 months ago, local activists and mothers of Srebrenica were walking on the streets of Tuzla together with the boys from Afghanistan, Syria, Algeria, and other countries. The mothers of Srebrenica were more than open to accept them and to let them walk together with them. Usually it's only women are standing there and doing this. And this was the first time after the war in Bosnia that there was many men standing there with a pillow with the names of people who are missing. When asked, mothers of Srebrenica, when they asked them, the local activists, if they, like, what would they think about this? They said that these boys are the same age like their sons when they disappeared in a massacre in Srebrenica. For me, it's very moving. For me, it's a big thing. It's a huge thing that they were accepted in this way. Unfortunately, this was not in the local media, this was not in international media or anywhere else. But I mean, it tells you a lot. How do we interact, and what does this mean for us, like arrival of such a big number of people who are in such a difficult situation? We do live together. We try our best as much as we can.
Thank you very much, Nizara. Perhaps you can post a link, a photo, even an article in Bosnia in the chat as well. With this incident could be good.
Oh yes, I will definitely, because the person who kind of like helped for this to happen is one of the volunteers in Tuzla, and we do have these photos, and they're very, You know, this year is 25 years since the genocide was committed in Srebrenica. It's a very, very big and very significant for whole Europe, for the entire world. And then you don't have anybody else standing with these mothers who are still looking for their sons, but the people on the move who came to this country. And they're there with them, and they're standing there with them. It's, believe me, it's a huge, huge thing. And it's a huge thing for mothers of Srebrenica, for every single person in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I also believe for many people who came here and who were able to see how does that feel. And you know, people from Afghanistan, they're also looking for their loved one. People from Syria, they can very easily identify with this story. And many of these boys, they're missing their mothers a lot. So this chance to meet with these women, to be in such a close contact and to be part of their protest, which lasts for 25 years, is a huge thing. This is a huge thing, not only for Bosnia, this is a huge thing for Europe.
Thank you very much, Nizara, for sharing this, really. Amina, would you take the floor also? No.
Just briefly, the moving example that Nijara just elaborated speaks a lot about the way solidarity can operate in our spaces, in transnational understanding, in connections between people based on their pain. And it speaks a lot how radical love can look like. This example is really moving, and also, I think, giving us a lot to think about the ways we can imagine, envision our realities differently. That example also speaks a lot about media discourses. How come we have not seen this anywhere? How come even in Sarajevo, most local, or Tuzla, most local media didn't cover that? How is it possible that big media in the region or in Europe have not covered this story? So that speaks a lot about media discourses, to answer your last question, Katarina. As for the questions we got here through the chat, I would say briefly that the asylum system in Croatia has deteriorated as well. Deterioration already started during the so-called refugee crisis, when, in a way, asylum was suspended and most people were encouraged to walk through or to run through or to just go through Croatia towards Austria and Germany. And asylum has been significantly operating only now through the models that EU created, the models of relocation and resettlement. This is probably the only way the asylum system currently operates, as there is no possibility for someone to come to Croatia and seek asylum as it used to be a practice earlier. I would say somewhat of a practice, not to romanticize that the asylum policies looked ever inclusive and were open to everyone. With such a high operating police violence at the borders and the pushbacks, people are not able to come to the borders and seek asylum anymore, except for that people do that, but the police is pushing them back to Bosnian and Serbian territory. Even when sometimes people come to or access the police stations inland, deep in the territory, they often also, or in most cases, get pushed back. So it is almost as if we cannot speak about the seeking asylum procedure anymore. You know, during the refugee crisis, again, so-called refugee crisis, two British scholars wrote a book called The Broken Refugee System, and they, a lot of things could be problematized in that book, but they had a point when they said that the asylum system is completely broken in Europe currently, and that the derogation of the right to asylum happened with the ways governments have been managing the whole process of movement of refugees, that became more of a managed process rather than a free process that enables access to asylum. They also warned, and many activists are warning, that the Geneva Conventions as international mechanism that ensures right to asylum does not work anymore. It fell through the cracks of the broken migration systems. So in Croatia, the only rise of the numbers of those who got asylum really happens through the models of resettlement. To answer the other question about anti-Muslim sentiment in Greece, and then in relation to that in Bosnia, Croatia, and the Balkans, yes, this is absolutely not new. The Muslim bodies are being located, they're being targeted, they're being labeled, they're being racialized, they're being physically attacked, and a Muslim is, every Muslim is a threat. We do have a differentiation, at least in Croatia, at least in some spaces that I'm acquainted with, we do have a differentiation of new and old Muslims. I come from a little town that has significant, whatever significant means in our parameter, has 1% of a Muslim minority, which we consider a high percent in Croatia. And, you know, here with us old Muslims and the new Muslims, we are definitely seeing that difference, where old Muslims are being more accepted as ones that are practicing moderate Islam and are not connected to terrorism, whereas new Muslims are bringing those new threats. So there is some working happening here as well, some kind of discursive working to differentiate good and bad Muslims as well.
Thank you, Emina. Thank you, Nizara. Okay, I think for now we can take a break from taking questions from the public and wait another 10 minutes and maybe something else pops up. For the moment, I would like to discuss with you concretely Trans-Balkan solidarity. What is it? Perhaps you can say also for the audience how you found together, what you want with this campaign, what is your expectations, how people can get involved. I would say Nizara go first and then Emina again.
This time I will let Emina go with this first.
Okay, Emina, go you with this first.
Okay, I think we know each other from the mud. People that are part of the Trans-Balkan solidarity know each other from different times when different types of radical work were happening, direct work on the ground mostly, and you know, people that started the Trans-Balkan initiative have been out in the streets and in the camps and in the improvised accommodations, in lack of better word to name those, and have been listening to people on the move and supporting their move and supporting their lives in solidarity ways. And so I think people just decided to react on what's happening currently under pandemic. Pandemic is a threat that has different strands. One is the health threat, the health danger, but the other is, as you know, as I read previously, it comes as a justification to categorize and classify and to treat those who are vulnerable in ways that are going to be more harmful. And then it also invokes systemic and systematic violence militarized violence, police violence, brutalities of all sorts that have been just worsened currently. So Trans-Balkan Solidarity is a collective of people that do not necessarily need to say their names and present themselves, you know, with their faces and names anywhere, but it's a more of a collective that shows that collective work and political language and groundwork supporting movement and rights is currently crucial. Trans-Balkan Solidarity started with the open letter, which was created under the slogan, "No one is safe until all are protected." And it was grounded in the fact that migrants and refugees are not protected from pandemic, but are left there to, you know, get disease, to get infected, and, you know, to do with it whatever. But also with that, we are trying to say that there is no public safety if all populations are not protected in the same ways. Trans-Balkan Solidarity also created a few videos where people all over the Europe, inclusive of those who are people on the move and who have moved from these spaces on their perilous journeys, who have said something about the pandemic and safety of refugees and migrants here. And also Trans-Balkan Solidarity recently reacted to violence that happened in Krnjača camp, where a boy asked for pajamas, and where those who were running the camp were not very much satisfied with his ask, and then that caused the whole new practice of militarization or military action, repression, and violence against those who are accommodated in the camp. So our way of reacting currently is through open letters, a blog, Facebook channels, different social media, while at the same time we are doing groundwork through distribution of food and supplies and sanitary and hygienic items. We are working in different locations in the Balkans. Some people are going to camps, and some people are visiting refugees and migrants in the other locations where they're trying to supply them with what is needed, while we all are working with those who are on the move to create political responses to this situation.
Thank you, Amina. Nizara, would you like to add something to that? And perhaps you can answer the question, if people listening now or watching the video later are, do you ask them to contact you to try to find ways to help out? Or do you advise them to look in your page? What is your?
Yeah, so I can just like add a little. I mean, Amina basically told you everything about Trans-Balkan Solidarity Initiative, but also for us, it's very important to send a message that very often, when especially foreign media are writing about this region, they divide us. Especially when it comes to Bosnia, they always, like, even now after 25 years, some international journalists, when they meet me, they ask me what is my nationality. Like, I don't know why somebody from New York do care about my nationality, but they just see us in these boxes. So to create something like this is important to tell that we don't see each other as such. We are together, and this is all. And that's why we also want to have people from Greece, people from Turkey, because we are all together in this, and we do have to act together in order to find solution and to help to people on the move, to be there, to show this solidarity. So this is one of the reasons. And also, like, if those people who speak our languages could read, it's very interesting the way how we wrote it, because we are people from all countries of former Yugoslavia, and we wrote it, each one of us wrote it the way he or she speaks or writes. So many people claim that we all are speaking different languages, but with this letter, we also prove in another way that we are the one and that we all speak one language, that we perfectly understand each other when we want to understand each other, and that we can act politically in same space, in same language. And that was very, very important. About situation in Bosnia, I can recommend on Facebook, we have a group called Help to Refugees in Bosnia and Herzegovina. You can follow what is happening. We try to update it regularly every day. Many of the information that we post on this Facebook group is coming directly from people on the move, from camps, from places where they live, from the move, from their journeys. They are sending us photos, they are sending us stories. And it's very, very good to have that kind of information, and we collect them and we publish. At the same time, there are several groups who are self-organized and who are working in Bosnia, still trying to do distribution and to help in the field. And we do need the help. It's really, we do need the help. Some people from who cannot now come to Bosnia, they are helping in the way that they are sending money to local groups, but also some international groups are still present. So one of the groups that is helping to locals in Velika Kladuša especially is No Name Kitchen. So helping to them is like indirectly sending money to Bosnia and Herzegovina, to people in Velika Kladuša. Also in Bihać, there is a group IPSIA, that's Italian group, which is very good also, and working with lots of people in Bihać and helping to a huge group of people. And there is a possibility of donating to them. Or the other way is to get in touch individually with us, with people in Tuzla, with people in Sarajevo, with people in Bihać, Kladuša, and other cities. And more or less, all of us are very active in Trans-Balkan Solidarity Group, and also in this Facebook group, Help to Refugees in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And you can write to us or directly or send a message on a Trans-Balkan Solidarity page, and we will find a way to connect you to somebody who is present in the field.
Thank you. If I can just add, Katarina, as I'm looking at the list of participants of this webinar, I'm seeing names of comrades that are daily responding to this horrific situation, and I just wanted to acknowledge their work, and would like to thank them for all the radical and sophisticated ways they are trying to change this state of emergency that is much more than the state of emergency our states are imposing currently with the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Emina. Thank you also to the 40 very, very tough people that are still with us since the beginning. I would like to remind you, Anizara, could you please post this photo from the mothers of Srebrenica in the chat also for the rest? And maybe, again, the link of the Facebook page you just mentioned. We have some minutes left, and I think we should take advantage of them. Perhaps now to address the topic of transnational solidarity, but now on a more, let's say, on the level of ideas. What I have been active myself in transnational initiatives for many years now, and at least to my understanding, there's somehow time fluxes and emergency fluxes, and in times of urgency, most of the times people find together, but in more calm times, so to say, or at times where everything else seems impossible or very difficult, those kind of transnational networks kind of suffer under the situation. It is actually pretty amazing to see how easy it is to get people to organize punctually around an emergency, but how difficult it is to make the spaces in which we strategize together. Now, in the situation we're in, of course, a part of the political life has transferred to the internet, at least as long as we're not allowed to meet each other physically on the outside. So at least I see a hope there to try figuring out really big inclusive spaces where we can talk campaigns and political strategies together. What would you think for such an idea, and do you see a similar necessity out there, is my question to both of you. Yes, I'm sorry, Nizara, I forgot to say that you have the floor. Your microphone.
Sorry, I'm trying also to post at the same time all these links in the chat. So can Amina just take for a second until I finish?
Of course, I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Amina,
sorry.
Amina, please.
In solidarity, I will jump in. Katarina, I just remembered as you were asking this question, when you said you need to take a moment because you feel angry. And I want to draw back to that feeling of anger that many of us are feeling, and say that anger is not necessarily destructive, but can be extremely productive feeling that we could relate to each other with and create coalitions where our conversations are going to maybe emerge from anger, but become more productive in their political responses. And I strongly believe in that. I think this is what we are now having in Trans-Balkan solidarity. And, you know, we do remember times when we had the humanitarian catastrophe in the Balkans and parts of Europe in 2015, 2016, when transnational movements were emerging and have had levels not only of respectful communication, but a communication that was envisioning really different realities and produced work that is still present, like border monitoring, for instance, moving across Balkans within states or within countries, and working in these horrific situations. So I think there are ways for us to muddle through this on transnational basis as well. What Nijara was talking about this this constant label of us being divided is not helping us often to see more of a unifying reactions or responses to the state of emergencies of different kinds. So I think that intention of creating coalitions, no matter how difficult it is, to work across differences, to work across distance, is I think a leading momentum that we should or could stick to. I would be curious to hear from participants of this webinar. What are the possibilities people are envisioning too, and where do people see constraints and confinement to the ideas they're having? Where are the pressures that are happening for local initiatives, for instance, to emerge? We need to be, I think, this is also sort of a matter of our political consciousness. We need to work on understanding how our realities look like, and to come to every detail of the problematic situations we are working in, because things are not necessarily the same, even though we might be seeing similar consequences. So, you know, if I'm here now sitting in Sisak and someone else is sitting in Novi Sad and there is a third person sitting in Sarajevo, I think we need to talk about what's happening at our locales every day. What kind of restrictive measures are we seeing? How are we drawing lines of similarity here, but also what kinds of tensions and silences are we not seeing and should focus on? This is also a matter of successful transnational movements.
Thank you very much. Emina, for this. I mean, I want to take up to your now proposal or call to the audience also to share their thoughts. In order to facilitate it, there is also a question from Anya Zafosnik in the chat, Nizara, for you. She seeks contact with you directly. I want to tell everybody on the audience that is willing and wants to, please feel free to use my email. You can send me your proposals and I can try to put everyone that has participated in this sense in touch. I could also collect these proposals if it's needed. I'm ready to do the work. We are coming towards the end, but I still have the feeling we have a lot to discuss. In my notes now, the one topic that we could or should also with perspective, perhaps right now, devote more time to is the intransparency of EU migration politics in the Balkans. I don't know if it has reached both of you. With Nizara, we had a brief talk before, and I know that she's aware of the news, but now in Austria, there is discussion around an agreement between the Austrian government and Serbia regarding the opening of a refugee camp where people previously denied asylum in Austria will be deported to if there is no chance of their repatriation. I mean, this already doesn't say anything. There has been some parliamentary questioning on this agreement. 2 weeks ago, we just got, let's say, the published answer and questions of the Minister of Interior in Austria, and more or less, he answered to his fellow parliament member that this agreement has a clause of silence, so he's not going to say anything about whether what is the criteria of the people that are supposed to be sent there, or how this thing will be operating, what are the legal rights, and so on. So I guess we can take maybe the next 5 minutes. If you're aware of similar discussions, we talked also with Nizara for in the end of February, there was also something like a phantom agreement between the EU and Albania that was circulating a little bit. We couldn't find anything about it, but yeah, are you aware of such bilateral agreements and how we organize to fight them? And I would say Nizara maybe first, and
Yes.
Amina.
Yeah, I have to remind you about one other very mysterious kind of, like, I don't know, was it agreement? We just lost every info about that, and it was from, I think, 2018 or the end of 17, when the EU talked about some kind of, as I remember, they call it disembarkment platforms or something like that, and it was supposed to be similar to what is happening in Libya. And the idea was to create that kind of, like, basically it's a hotspot at the end. Let us use the terms. In Albania and one other Balkan country. Albania said no, but I don't really believe that any of the Balkan countries is in a position to say no. We don't know what did happen with that, but the idea was that to create the places that will kind of like keep people or prevent them from moving, but also like give possibility to EU to send back people to this region. I kind of like have a feeling that it is already happening. I do not know if the agreements are signed. We don't have this kind of information, and I hope that we will be that soon something like this, like it came out in the case of Austria. There is a big chance that we will heard more. And again, going back to one of the questions from the attendees is this is exactly what the people from the EU could do. Help to everybody to find out about these kind of agreements more, and then we can kind of like try to find a way how to fight them if there is a need to fight them, or what to do, basically how to get ready and to prepare for this.
Thank you very much, Nizara. Before giving the word to you, Emina, Sophia, look up in the chat. Nizara actually posted the links. They're just not blue. If you go 3 comments up in the chat, you will find all the links that you're looking for. Emina, please. You're muted.
Yeah, I figured, sorry. I just have, one sentence to your question. I think EU is committing a crime by dislocating refugee camps and all sorts of camps to its periphery, by exploiting or by subjecting people to police state and social violence. And I am hoping that in near future, we will have established kind of Nuremberg trials where different states and their leaders are going to answer to the judicial authorities about the actions they're doing. This is a crime that we already saw in Europe. This is a crime that is repetitive, and we should have reacted more loudly, and we should keep reacting more vocally, and seek for the international instruments that can prosecute these crimes, while at the same time working on creating of solidarity threads on ground.
Thank you very much, Amina. I would like to ask Tatiana if she has another question in the Q&A box.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
There is one question left which regards with the role or the accountability of the IOM, and whether it would be relevant to try to involve them more regarding the situation of people on the move in the Balkans. And then a second one, which was already a little bit touched by Emina, and that has to do with the, so it comes from Italy, from Cristina, and now they are facing this possibility of tracking down people's movement, and whether this discussion is also going on in Croatia and in Bosnia, and to which extent this could be further used to be used against refugees and migrants in your countries.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. I would ask now Nizara and Emina to take the floor again, but also maybe include your final remarks. And yeah, please.
Thank you. So first to Christina. No, it's still, I mean, from time to time we hear something about all this, but it's still not happening, and I don't believe it's possible to happen. At least I don't believe, but everything is possible. But no, it's still not something that we are talking about in Bosnia. To question about IOM, that's very important question. We should all talk much more about the role, not only of IOM, but of UNHCR and other UN partners and agencies that are working with people on the move. From what I can see, from what I saw before in Greece, also in some other countries in the region, but what I see here in Bosnia, the role of the IOM is the role given to them by their donors. The biggest donor for IOM in Bosnia and Herzegovina is EU, but also other individual governments and big organizations are also donors, and they act upon what donors are asking from them. I have to say that from what I see here in Bosnia, sometimes the way how they act and what they do in the field and the way how they treat people on the move, the way how they treat local media, the way how they treat local activists and volunteers is highly problematic. And I'm not sure that at least what is happening with IOM in Bosnia and Herzegovina there is any reason for anybody who is involved to be proud. This violence, this dehumanization, and that's why I'm talking about concentration camps. That's why I'm insisting on concentration camps in Bosnia, because the concentration camps are not only places where people were killed, where people died. It's places where people were taken to as an act of dehumanization. And that's a huge problem. IOM is taking part in it. And people from European Union, citizens of European Union, are paying them for that. So it is a big important topic, and we should talk more about, as I said, the role of all these big international organizations in what is happening now, as well as we should have talked about that 20-something years ago when they left us dying here in Bosnia.
I mean, Nizara, sorry, I'm gonna ask you ad hoc, but currently the UNHCR is not in Bosnia, right?
UNHCR never left Bosnia. They came during the war and they are still here. They are working with the refugees, apparently. From time to time, we hear something about them and their presence here. I know that they are paying one legal organization that is offering free legal aid to people on the move, but they never do much. They never done more than that. They never come out in the public and say, listen, somebody is violating human rights of these people. So their role is not visible, at least to me at the moment.
Thank you very much. Emina, the floor is yours.
I second Nijara's words, and I have nothing much to add, except to underline that the complicity of international organizations needs to put under scrutiny. As for the second question, I think, you know, lots of activists in the Balkans have already spoken about that when IOM was developing or documenting, keeping the track of the refugees that passed through 2 refugee camps that we had here during the so-called refugee crisis in 2015 and 2016. And we kind of reacted against that. And I will just reiterate here and say, I strongly oppose any type of development of technology that is going to track and document people's movement in any way until or unless the technology is created or until the technology is accessible to those who want to use it the ways they find it most functional. You know, lots of different applications were created also during the so-called refugee crisis, and it looks like that many of them were created for or with bad purpose. One is to track people, the other is to control people, the third is to manage people, the fourth is to, you know, keep people on distance and so on. So I really do not think that we are getting into more advanced situation with tracking people's movement. Movement should be free of charge, should be free of control, and should be free of violence.
Thank you very much, Emina. I hope now my microphone is working. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Emina. Thank you very much, Nizara. Thank you to everybody that has stayed with us until now. Thank you for taking the time to conclude, 3 sentences. What is going on right now in the Balkans is a European issue. We have also the responsibility to fight for the visibility of the situation of people in the move right now in the Balkans. So I hope this webinar actually motivates you to take more time, stay active, and try to show your solidarity. We will continue with a series of webinars. Next stops would be the Right to Sea Rescue. And we are hoping to get in touch with people from Calais. And we hope to come back to you, Emina and Nizara, in some weeks and check on the situation and see how things are going on and if something has changed. If any of you two would like to say anything else, now would be the time. Otherwise, I would wish everybody good night. Thank you, Emina, also for putting away your care work for these 2 hours. All the best to everyone from me. Yeah, Nizara, Emina, you want to add something?
Just thank you for a time and a space to talk about this, and for thank you.
We will meet soon, all of us. Hopefully, also close. Hopefully, also, yes, we can hug when we meet in person. Thank you very much, both of you. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Stay strong. You're great. Thank you.
Stay
Bye-bye.
well. Be safe. Bye.
I'm leaving also my camera on as people exit.